In 1880, human bones were discovered in an old water source just a few miles from Somerset, Kentucky. That alone would have been enough to send a ripple of shockwaves throughout Pulaski County. But then someone remembered a story told years earlier by a man named Samuel Woods. Woods claimed he had witnessed a murder, and according to him, one of the men now lying dead in an abandoned well had a name: James Willis. There was just one problem. A few months later, James Willis apparently walked back into Somerset. Or at least someone claiming his identity did. This is the story of Deadfall Hollow and the murder at the Stillhouse. The story begins in June of 1880 along the old Mount Vernon Road outside Somerset. Roughly the corridor we know today as Highway 80, likely somewhere west of the present-day Highway 461 junction. Old newspapers disagreed about exactly how many sets of human remains were discovered. Some reported one, others reported two, one reported three. But they agreed on something much more important. Human bones had been found in or near an old well, and their discovery resurrected a story that Pulaski County had nearly forgotten. Roughly 14 years earlier, a young stranger named James Willis had come to Pulaski County and found work at a distillery operated by Robert and James Nunnally, about 4 miles outside Somerset. And that Nunnally name may sound familiar. Records point to Robert and James being members of the same Nunnally family later associated with Nunnally Springs and the Nunnally Springs Hotel near Mount Victory. The same place we mentioned in our earlier story about the deadly shootout at the Mount Victory camp meeting in 1903. So this wasn't an unfamiliar family passing briefly through Pulaski County. The Nunnally name would remain tied to this part of the county for years to come. The young man working at their distillery was another matter. His name was reported as James Willis, although later newspapers sometimes called him James Millis, one of several identity problems that would eventually make this case almost impossible to untangle. He was said to be about 22 years old, born in New York and raised in Illinois. He told people he had no relatives in Kentucky. But he wasn't the only outsider who had somehow made his way to this corner of Pulaski County. Living nearby was Samuel Woods, a black man with a remarkable story of his own. Woods later testified that he had been born in Campbell County, Virginia, raised in West Tennessee, and had come into Kentucky during the Civil War as a drummer with the 1st Tennessee Confederate Infantry during General Braxton Bragg's invasion of the state. At the Battle of Perryville in 1862, Woods said he was captured and he never left Kentucky. The surviving account doesn't tell us exactly where Woods went after Perryville or how he eventually reached Somerset. But by the spring of 1865, he was living near the Nunnally Distillery in Pulaski County. That is where these two outsiders, Willis and Woods, found one another. Willis slept at the Stillhouse. Woods lived nearby in a cabin. With neither man apparently having much of a social circle there, the two became friends. Woods visited Willis at the distillery, and Willis visited Woods at his cabin. Then, shortly before Willis disappeared, he told Woods something important. He had received a draft, or check, for $300. The newspapers never explained who sent Willis that money or why he received it. But $300 in 1866 was a substantial sum, especially for a 22-year-old laborer working at a rural Kentucky distillery. And Willis told Woods exactly what he intended to do with it. He was going to give the draft to his employer, Robert Nunnally, to have it collected. A few days later, James Willis disappeared. Woods claimed he knew why. He testified that one night he had visited Willis at the distillery. After leaving, Woods heard several men approaching and concealed himself nearby. He said he recognized 3 of them: Robert Nunnally, John Barry Gilmore, and Josephus Meese. According to Woods, Nunnally entered the distillery, retrieved an axe, and went back inside. Woods said he heard 2 blows, then groaning, then silence. A short time later, he claimed the 3 men emerged carrying a body suspended from a pole. Woods believed the dead man was James Willis. The men carried the body away into the darkness. Woods did not follow them, and for years, no one seemed to miss Willis, and no body was officially connected to his sudden disappearance. Woods later said he had told a local man, Clay Smith, what he had witnessed and had been warned to remain quiet because the accused men might kill him too. Whatever happened that night, Woods eventually left Pulaski County and settled in Boyle County. Then came 1880. Human remains were finally discovered in the abandoned well on Old Mount Vernon Road. People began to talk. Perhaps Clay Smith told authorities what he'd been told. Whatever happened, we know that Wood's old story suddenly mattered. Robert Nunley and John Barry Gilmore were arrested, and authorities sought out Josephus Meese. Eventually, Samuel Woods returned to tell his story under oath. For a moment, it appeared that a murder hidden for more than a decade might finally be solved. Then the supposedly dead man came back. James Nunley, Robert's brother, had been searching for James Willis and advertising for information about him in the newspapers. He was relentless in his search, but maintained he'd been searching for Willis before the bones were found. At one point, James put forth the idea that the bones belonged to Woods before Woods was located in Boyle County. During the search for Willis, a response to his ad led him all the way to Crittenden County in western Kentucky. There, he found a man cutting wood who claimed that he was James Willis. The man returned to Somerset. If he truly was Willis, Samuel Woods had just sworn under oath that he had witnessed the murder of a man who was very much alive. Authorities immediately turned their attention to Woods. He was arrested for perjury, but Woods refused to change his story. Before being taken back to Somerset, Woods told a reporter that the man claiming to be Willis was a fraud. Woods insisted that he had heard the blows that killed his friend. He had seen the body carried away, and he was prepared, in his words, to live or die by what he had sworn. Then, Woods escaped from the Pulaski County Jail. The murder witness had become a fugitive, and the case was about to become even stranger. By early 1881, the third party accused in the murder, Josephus Meese, had been captured. Then, Meese's wife reportedly came forward with an explosive story of her own. According to the newspaper account, she said everyone had been arguing over the identity of the wrong dead man. The victim, she claimed, was not James Willis at all. He was a traveling peddler named Phillips, and she did not describe Samuel Woods as an innocent witness. She accused him of being one of the killers. Mrs. Meese claimed 6 people were involved: Robert Nunley, John Barry Gilmore, Josephus Meese, James Willis himself, Samuel Woods, and another of Robert's brothers, Willis Nunley. She alleged that Phillips had been sleeping inside the Stillhouse when the attack occurred, and in her version of the story, it was Woods, not Robert Nunley, who wielded the axe. She claimed the killers robbed Phillips, divided the proceeds, bound his body, carried it away, and disposed of it in a nearby sinkhole. Suddenly, there were 2 completely different versions of the same night. In Wood's story, he was a frightened witness watching the murder of his friend, James Willis. In Mrs. Meese's story, Woods was one of the killers, and James Willis was alive because he had participated in the crime himself. So which story was true? The courts now faced an even more basic question. Was the man who had returned to Somerset actually James Willis? By February 1881, Woods was back before the court on the perjury charge. Witness after witness testified that they believed the returning man was, in fact, Willis. They remembered unusual physical characteristics: a scar, a distinctive thumbnail, his teeth, even the way he walked. But one man, Erasmus Fisher, disagreed. Fisher claimed he had known the original Willis well, and he said the man who returned to Somerset was not him. Then the human bones themselves were brought into court. Medical witnesses said the remains were compatible with the physical build witnesses had described for Willis. They also said the bones showed evidence of having been exposed to fire. The proceeding ended without resolving the mystery. Woods was held over for circuit court under bond. Then came the murder trials. In April 1881, Robert Nunley faced a jury. 7 jurors favored conviction. 5 favored acquittal. The result was a mistrial. Then the man claiming to be Willis changed his story. Reports said he now claimed that another James Willis, his cousin, had been in Pulaski County around the time of the murder, and that cousin had disappeared. The supposedly dead man had gone from saying, essentially, "I am James Willis, and I am alive," to suggesting that perhaps a different James Willis had been murdered after all. In May 1881, John Barry Gilmore and Josephus Meese went before a jury. They were convicted and sentenced to 10 years in the penitentiary. But even that did not settle the identity of the victim. After the trial, Samuel Woods reportedly made yet another startling statement. He said the bones presented in court were not those of James Willis. According to Woods, Willis' actual remains were hidden somewhere else nearby. Men went searching. They found nothing. Robert Nunley's case dragged on. Eventually, it was moved from Pulaski County to Rockcastle County. In January 1883, Nunley went before another jury. The case had been brought under the older law applicable to the alleged 1866 murder, and the jury was not instructed on manslaughter. For murder, Nunley faced death. Otherwise, he walked free. After about an hour of deliberation, the jury chose acquittal. The newspaper later reported that one juror explained that they simply did not believe the evidence justified hanging him. A few months later, Gilmore and Meese, the two men serving 10-year sentences, were pardoned by Kentucky's governor, Luke Blackburn. And that was effectively the end of the prosecutions. But not the mystery. Because 15 years later, in 1898, the case surfaced one final time. The circuit clerk in Rockcastle County told a newspaper reporter that a box of human bones was still sitting inside his office vault. They were believed to have come from the old Pulaski County murder case. Nearly 2 decades after the bones were first discovered, no one could say with certainty whose remains they were. More than a century later, the questions remain. Who died near that Somerset distillery? Willis or Phillips? Who was the man who later appeared claiming to be Willis? Was Samuel Woods a witness or a participant? Or was he a man whose story became tangled in a case where almost everyone seemed to have something to hide? We know there were bones. We know men went to prison for a short time, and we know another man was acquitted by a jury. We also know that, years later, a box containing part of the evidence was still sitting in a courthouse vault. What we don't know is the one thing everyone wanted to know from the beginning. Who do the bones belong to, and a sort of morbid curiosity as to where those bones are today. Somewhere beneath the hills outside Somerset, the answer may still be waiting. There could even be another set of remains that Woods talked about. One thing is for certain, nearly 160 years later, Pulaski County's dead are still keeping secrets. Have you heard this story before? Or perhaps have a connection in some way? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear about it. Follow us on Facebook at Lake Cumberland Tactical Innovations or on YouTube and TikTok at Somerset Sleuths 25. As always, thanks for watching.